You are listening to the Emtech Group podcast series, your source for trends about automated QA testing for the insurance industry.
Hey, Spencer.
Hey, Jeff.
I was sitting here thinking on this cloudy, wonderful winter Toronto afternoon about the fact that I actually had worked in an industry that, although the terminology is different, was actually using knowledge graphs years ago.
Oh, really? That sounds cool.
Yeah, it was the telephone. The term is IVR, interactive voice response, but it's those systems that you interact with whenever you try and call a bank or an insurance company, or you want to talk to a live person, and you have to walk through the various menus and recordings in order to get stuff done.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and it's surprising that there's this commonality there, and it wasn't expected, but the company that I worked for used to actually model their telephone script workflows with flowcharts. Well, that was the terms that we used.
Okay.
And you don't necessarily see the similarity at the beginning, but it clicked when I started taking a look at what our application does, what QMT does, and there are a lot of similarities.
Okay, cool.
It's more modern. You're interacting and modeling interactions with a different technology, but in the end, part of what you're modeling with QMT is basically how a user is going to interact with the various systems that the insurance company uses in order to set up a policy or do one of the other parts of the workflow. And a lot of that is basically user does this now. What's the response supposed to be? Presented in a graph that makes it nice and simple and easy for somebody to understand. And the IVR industry had a similar sort of thing, and their solution, this company was an analogous solution to this, and it really surprised me that there were the similarities there.
I see. You know what? That's really interesting because I come from a long time testing background, right? So software testing, and a lot of things were started very manual, 20 some odd years ago, and we did automation, but automation really I found it was very tricky, right? You did have to have a developer's hat on. You did have to get down in the weeds. You did have to get the code base. And if you didn't have that skill set, you would get a set of automation tests working. You would get help from your development team, and then they would never be maintained. So it was a very tricky thing to keep the automation maintained.
Yeah, that's actually the maintenance thing is actually key in the use of developers. I mean, my background is primarily doing development, and when we worked there, they still had developers doing a lot of the development of these IVR systems, but they had non-developers doing a lot of the design and doing the development of the call flow, because the tools that they had using their flowchart basically allowed them to drag and drop and adjust connections and basically edit the call flow in a flowchart, which then was processed and ended up being the script on the system, which is very similar to what we have here. And you mentioned the maintenance aspect. They still required a lot of developers, but moving it to the flowchart allowed people that were not developers to actually be involved in the process. And it was people that have a different skill set than the developers. These people were not necessarily, not that they had the engineering discipline, but they knew their product, and they knew their product really well, and they were able to make tweaks and actually update the product instead of actually having to translate it to a developer that may not have the same domain knowledge.
Yeah.
So, and
I actually from the actual testing background, you used to have to go through each and every workflow, right? And actually had to figure out the workflows, right? And you would have to go through each and every response and each and every decision point. And it was all manual at one time. Even when you had the automation tools, you still had to get everything in there. And now, actually, reviewing what we're doing with this knowledge graph it's amazing, like, because you can get full coverage, right? And you not only get full coverage, you can adjust it to get partial and set up specific workflows that you want to just test.
And it was never the case that the tests were something that a non-developer or non-tester could understand. It wasn't like you could turn around. I mean, at least I'm assuming this, that you could take these test cases and just basically present them as is to a third party, say that's in another department of the company, and have them go, "Oh, I can see what you're testing. This makes sense to me." Or I'm assuming that's the case, right? You didn't have that?
Exactly. A lot of times we would actually have to, a lot of phone calls, a lot of meetings to actually understand the workflows. And now with doing this with a knowledge base, it's so much easier.
Yeah. It was the same thing there. It's like they were a big company. They had the voice systems, but they also had to have a call center for when people were using the voice system and needed help. And putting the information in this flow chart, which basically was a knowledge graph, allowed them to basically have one single source of truth. And you could take that flow chart and give it to somebody that was in their call center and customer support and show it to them, and they would instantly understand the flow, and they'd be able to work and talk with the customer about it. You didn't necessarily have to have all the documentation and all the other stuff that you'd have to do with a normal program. It would be that one thing was both the program and the documentation. And it could go to the marketing team, the support team. Everybody basically could just use that. And that to me is really impressive. Funnily enough, at the time, I didn't think it was that impressive.
Yeah, I agree, 100%.
Yeah. At the time, as a developer, I'm thinking it's much quicker for me to program this in another language than in a flowchart. And you didn't necessarily see the benefit of having non-developers be involved in this process. It seemed like the developers thought they were the actual experts on this. And coming here, I can see that although you still need you need domain knowledge, but you don't necessarily need programming knowledge when you're using the knowledge graph. And I think that the trade-off, I think, is definitely in the favor of the company to be having a knowledge graph used to expose this information than have it sort of be in the hands of developers who are focused and specialized.
Yeah, you know what? What I see, there's really three main things, right? One is you're getting the coverage, right? You're getting all the coverage of the entire workflow that is under test, right? You're getting the speed that you're getting that coverage, and how long it takes to get all those tests up and being able to have them generated and executed, right? And then you have the flexibility, right? The flexibility actually allows you to change and modify this, quickly, easily. You don't need to be a specialist. And as soon as you do that, then you have, so many different ways to apply this testing.
Yeah, I agree. That especially the not having to bring the specialist in is, I think, really the turnaround time. It's much quicker when you do that. The not having to bring in somebody to change the documentation, being allowed to have basically anybody who knows the product being able to look at this and at a glance, be able to make suggestions, and you changing basically instantaneously based on that feedback is, I think, it adds a lot. Spreading the knowledge through a knowledge graph, I think, has lots of benefits. And then, like I said, it was a little bit surprising when I started, because in my first experience, I didn't understand that, but now it does make total sense. It's sort of funny, we never called it a knowledge graph back then, but that's basically what these things were.
Yeah. Anyways, Jeff, I got to get going. I got another meeting to run to, but hope to talk about this again.
Yeah. This is, so much more fun. We should be doing this a lot more.
I agree.
Talk to you later.
Bye for now.
Bye.